What's up, everybody, and welcome to the first video on the 12 days of Acemas. I was originally going to call this Chris Maneuvers, but that sounds like a Hideo Kojima character, and didn't really want to invoke him on this. So Acemas it is. I originally had like a whole recorded thing before I got into the actual PowerPoint presentation here that unfortunately got recorded over. So if the rest of the video sounds kind of weird to you, sorry about that. It got discombobulated, but um the for the next 12 days I'm going to be uploading daily. It's going to be all kinds of different stuff. It could be a deck profile. I want to do a quiz. There will probably be live streams in between. I'll have to record things in advance, of course, for when I'm at in Rochester for the regional and things like that. So there will be uploads even when I'm out of town. Knock on wood, fingers crossed. We're already running into technical issues, but I had to get this one up today because there's only 12 days until Christmas Day, the final upload. So hopefully join me on this journey of love bombing the community with videos for the next week and a half, I guess. 12 days is a weird amount, but without further ado, on to our topic for today. It's ban lists and how we got it right. What the Glasgow ban list taught us, I guess, about ban lists and basically how it's impacting the metagame. I wanted to talk about how everything kind of went right for once with the ban list and my thoughts on what we can do with it more. So ban lists are good and good ban lists are great, and we've got what makes a good ban list. So I think the most recent ban list did all three of these things. It brings new decks into the format without eliminating wholesome strategies, and it eliminates toxic strategies from the format. I put both of those things in quotations because it's definitely up to subjective interpretation on what those mean. But for the most part, you don't want to eliminate a normal good strategy. You don't want to eliminate all aggro or all combo or all control or anything like that. Um, but you do want to get rid of things that we consider too toxic, infinite loops, things that mill your deck and take an hour to play one turn, with the combined firepower type stuff. Those sort of strategies. If there ever was like a, infinite take multiple turns, they'd probably hit it too, right? So eliminating toxic strategies is pretty important. And then I think cutting the grass evenly amongst top decks. And I think that's where we've kind of failed in the past the most. You guys know me. I'm always like, you got to hit so many powerful cards if we really want to see an impact. And while 28 is like a perfect number to get back to where I would want to be hitting, I think it was 5 cards on the most recent ban list. I think did a good job to not just try and eliminate one of those strategies and leave the rest completely untouched. And they did some pretty good jobs of picking cards too. So where this ban list succeeded was an adequate number of hits to cut the grass, right? We just talked about that. Teaming with the Attack Titan was pretty annoying in multiple decks. It was technically part of the Devil Jin decks. I think pretty much every Devil Jin was playing it. I've definitely seen Devil Jins add it to their card pool so they can airship it back into their hand because it's a 1 difficulty attack 90% of the time in that deck. Of course, the Porco decks were abusing it. Pretty much every fire deck, every fire tune deck that wasn't Pony is probably going to put it in their list. So being able to hit multiple decks and just trim a little bit from those, I think was really good. It eliminated toxic strategies, again in quotations, but things like sweeping daggers was not a fun strategy for people. I think the only toxic strategy that might have been left alone was the Deku strategy, and I do think with the Guilty Gear previews we had, the Deku strat hopefully is getting a lot more things that touch it, such as the Roman cancel token, cards like Heat Tackle, being able to cancel the Deku response. There should be some more play into it, but that's probably the main one that I think people think is really toxic. But even stuff like Titan Cliff, wheel my half my hand away and build a 6 check was pretty ridiculous. So I think they eliminated that. Also, the main one that I'll talk about a little bit later is Pony's strategy of clearing the card pool over and over and over again. loops in general, kind of toxic. So there's some looping that you have to do, but usually it's not just a singular card by itself that you want making that happen. It identified the role players in multiple decks instead of hitting characters. Now, I know we did just talk about Pony getting hit, but Pony was not kneecapped. We didn't see any characters get absolutely ruined by an errata or become totally unplayable. Although Pony didn't show up at this most recent event, I do think that the way people have been playing Pony, falls under toxic strategy, and the most successful Pony players that I've talked to, at least, don't seem super phased by the limitation on the once per turn. They're just more excited to do other strategies. And then they weren't afraid to hit higher rarity cards. These were like all ultra rares, right? Sweeping Daggers was an ultra rare. Teaming with the Attack Titan was an ultra rare. Nine Titans was an ultra rare, right? So we weren't afraid to hit the higher rarity cards. Obviously, I do think you want to try and focus on lower rarity cards where you can. The basically fast rotation of Titancliff, I think, was a great hit. It was popping up in a lot of decks. It was becoming a really baseline sort of thing. And, we'll talk about another card that's kind of fitting in the same slot as Titancliff. But when a card is being a baseline for I have to build a strategy on this symbol around it, it's okay to hit it too. So I think hitting the lower rarity cards is definitely something that the companies want to do. It's what shopkeepers want you to do and collectors want you to do, but sometimes you have to, right? So not being afraid to hit them is fine, even if it's not your first goal. So eliminating toxic strategies, what do we mean by that? What did we identify as toxic strategies? So Pony Tsunatori is a super versatile character. Changing the zone is a really strong ability. Plus or minus speed is something that seven handers have kind of lived and died by. Making her pay for it is a little rough, but the versatility is there. And then the high stakes cash out on clearing your card pool was kind of meant to be something you could build up to it and have like a powerful late game strategy when things weren't quite working out. But decks were hyper focusing on playing this solitaire, clear my card pool, do everything I can, and overwhelm you through all interaction, right? It was a very, very weird, very not interactive for the most part game plan. It could usually fight over most card pool clogging because of cards like Lethal Slash. Pony's ability to clear any card from the card pool made it so you had to clog multiple times. The amount of card draw the character was getting, to help you see multiple Lethal Slashes so you can save those counters up for non-attack cards. It was all just a little too much. And so I think that Pony getting to still clear is really nice, the once per turn, and then using your counters for other things to play a more quote unquote normal game plan, I think is on the table. You can still do an incredible amount of card pool clearing based on this character's symbols. This character with Beast Summoning and Thunder Spear demo is still really insane. You still have all the card draw. I always said you should hit the card draw for this character to slow them down because it's other characters that will probably be abusing them too. But for the most part, it's only been Pony abusing Wish Hard and Feral Shriek. So, putting the errata on Pony is kind of fine, especially since I think a lot of people are kind of assuming that there's going to be more counter generation stuff coming soon. So if Pony had access to more horn counters, it would probably get out of hand even sooner in the game. So I'm okay with that. Hitting the solitaire style of gameplay is a good idea. Again, Pony can just play a zone change game plan. They can force stats onto things like Falling Skies. It doesn't have to be all about clearing the card pool, and clearing the card pool once per turn is basically what other decks get to do typically, unless you're like Mikasa, I guess. But yeah, I would maybe have said maybe they could have given you a reduction on the cost, but it is what it is. Sweeping Daggers gate kept multiple strategies for too lenient of a cost. Sweeping Daggers has been called out for stopping people from playing high difficulty cards. You guys know I personally I'm still a little sus on that one, but We'll need more events to really know for sure on that side. But it also prevented decks that really needed like a discard pile strategy. I know that as much as I like Elder Taguro, you know, I would basically be forced to play Death so I could play Sweeping Daggers, so I could remove all of their Sweeping Daggers as soon as they show up, and that's just it's not a very reliable game plan. And to play the style of Elder Taguro that I wanted to, Sweeping Daggers was actually gatekeeping me. As much as I like Sweeping Daggers and stick up for it, that did gatekeep a strategy that I enjoyed. Same thing with Ghidorah, who has basically the same ability as Elder Taguro, very similar ability at least. Getting his cards that he wants to block with sniped by daggers sucks really bad. He also likes to play Sweeping Daggers on two of his symbols, and it created like this very annoying pattern of whoever gets to play it first gets to kind of, shore up their game plan against it long term. So Sweeping Daggers being toxic as a 4 difficulty utility piece baseline that then also could just become the best attack for whatever situation, making its versatility and utility and the versatility to become a game winning piece, it's too much. So it's pretty toxic that a 4 difficulty attack can copy effects of higher stuff for no cost. I think making it a thief enhance in the future could be cool. That way at least bad characters can do it. I don't think there's a really strong thief yet. I like the thief characters for what they are, but they're not like powerhouses in the metagame, right? Nine Titans reduced the number of interaction points. It was way too accessible. Getting to start the game with it and play for Hanji, being able to build it with multiple cards, Duplicitous Recollection and Beast Titans Rock Barrage made that card way too accessible. And, Titan Pile is already reducing interaction a lot of the time. But Nine Titans made it so that pretty much any attack early game was just either going to be forced through by doubling its speed, or was going to punish your opponent, and made seven handers feel really bad. Seven hander just doesn't have the right block zone, or checked bad on a block and really needed the effect from it, stuff like that. It was just really hard for them to keep up. They had to do a lot to fight back on Nine Titans. And then Porco loops, I won't get into too much because I think that probably also comes down to taste, but it's pretty easy for a loop strategy to be seen as toxic, and it was easily one of my least favorite to play against. The glow up of new decks. So this is something that we'll have to see more of. This is probably the weakest point I've got in this whole PowerPoint, but we did see Mikasa Ackerman, Hizuru's Hope, become a huge standout in the EU regional. This is a character that people have talked about being really strong for a while now, and we've never really seen it. We've seen it on stream be like really good and play like a crazy, wacky, over the top game plan, high risk, high reward type stuff. But seeing it find some success in top cuts, make deep runs, have the most representation in top cuts was definitely a glow up for the character. Having, being that character that everyone was really afraid of at first, and then not really being able to fight into the upper crust. That's a sign that this is a good grass cutting measure, because this deck is now brought up to the level of other decks, but they're not unplayable. Pretty much every deck that got hit except I think Porco, still I guess Pony and Porco, the seven handers, were pretty good, in the EU regional, had top marks near top cuts, if not actually in it. So Mikasa is the standout there. Mitchell Chimino recovered from the VME ban. Granted, this could just be a Mitchell Chimino hyper focusing on his own character game plan. People will tell me, oh, it's the player, not the character. But I truly believe that not having to deal with Nine Titans making stuff cartoonishly unblockable for Mitchell Chimino is a huge benefit to this character. Not having Sweeping Daggers like nuke your really specific combo pieces. At least in my experience, typically there's like very specific interaction points for the Mitchell Chimino deck that they want to hit. So these a couple of these bans, just the game going longer. Mitchell Chimino getting more value out of his abilities, because typically it's the hand sculpting, right? It's the fact that these cards are going to get reviewed and then removed and then added to hand and then reviewed again and things like that and sculpted. So him getting to like turn 3, turn 4 definitely helps out a lot. And then this hasn't quite shown up yet, and I think it'll take people who are really invested in Porco, people are really invested in Pony, people like playing Jamie, and we've seen some really spicy Jamie lists. But I think seven handers in general blow up from this ban list. A lot of these strategies that were holding them down, it was either the two most toxic seven handers that got hit with Pony and Porco Loop. Um, and so all these other decks that a lot of times, they share, like Jamie shares two symbols with Pony. So in an attuned world, you're oftentimes looking at your Jamie deck and you're like, well, if I want to do something very unique from Pony, I got to go to water. And if you're going to be a water aggro deck, you end up looking a lot like Godzilla. And it starts like this really toxic, flowchart effect of like, why am I not just this character that's slightly better or plays better cards, things like that. Whereas Jamie has no real defensive ability. He's a seven hander who got completely squashed by Titan attacks if he just went second, and there was, he just had to draw his defense. So aggro seven hand size characters are still having it a little tough in this world. They have to have a pretty unfair gimmick to feel really good, or they have to have the defensive gimmicks that decks like Porco and Pony had. And so having these really big impactful cards kind of tone down the better aggro characters and hurt the combo decks that were one-shotting seven handers, I think really helped them out a lot. And it's not a strategy we get to see too often. And usually when we do see aggro seven handers, they're usually like doing something so completely over the top, it's no wonder they're good, like Tokoyamis and Hanji Zoes of the past. Which I guess Hanji, I don't think anyone really played the aggro version of. Anyways, so my last panel for you guys, what might have been missed, and my personal watch list is just my opinion. As we go into the post Guilty Gear Tension world, I think my biggest gripe, I guess, is that Filled Without is largely doing what Sweeping Daggers did, but in a more high risk, high reward kind of way. It has a bigger deck building cost because it's an action, right? So that's kind of the big difference, I guess, is it also, your rival has to check against it. The big thing about Sweeping Daggers versus Filled Without is if you stole my 9 diff attack, I didn't just pay for it and then I got hosed by a hand trap. So there's a lot of different wrinkles to it. Filled Without isn't going to kill you like Sweeping Daggers will. So it's hard to really compare the two. But I think as far as, do I want to risk playing Colossal Confrontation? Not in a world where my opponent's 2 difficulty card is going to remove everything good about that card. So also it's infinity symbol, so you just kind of have to expect it in every matchup, and it ends up being people have called it like a silver bullet from design, so that they can really push the limits, and that's okay for the most part, but I feel like we're all gonna get sick of it if we're not already. So Massive Mutant Machine decks look to get more powerful post rotation. It cut off my point. Whatever. Forcing Surrender and other tools to get rid of cards from the card pool are gonna rotate. Hacker Extraordinaire, I think, is what's supposed to be there. Forcing Surrender and Hacker Extraordinaire are rotating, right? So ways to interact with assets on the rival's turn are starting to go away. Ways to interact with cards in the card pool are going away. We might see, in KOF, and we might see in Godzilla ways to maybe seal more cards in the card pool. So that could be replaced, but for the most part, from where I'm at right now, the Massive Mutant Machine decks are already really good. They're already stuff that people enjoy brewing around, and they're not quite seeing results just yet. But once they do, we're probably going to get sick of it really fast. And so I feel like that's always going to be on a watch list. Like Equipment Heist should always be on a watch list just because of the consistency of searching your deck. I'm really afraid that Ocean Buddies plus Equipment Heist is going to become like this all-consuming like format combo where you're either like hard teched against it or you're playing it. But that is 2 very specific symbols your character has to have. even in the attuned world. So we'll see about that. But right now, it's kind of neat seeing the overhaul decks and the Pumat Soul decks kind of float around, higher numbers like 8 through 16. But if they ever start winning events, probably not going to look too good. And then, of course, the biggest equipment heist abuser, Devil Jin and Ocean Buddies, are making the card pool more accessible than ever. So we probably have to watch out what card pool effects are coming out. Devil Jin was a character that on release I didn't see it. People told me he was going to be absolutely busted. He just, we all agreed he needed one or two pieces, and he's gotten a piece every set. He's gotten like every set has given him a new piece, even especially if you include like teaming with the Attack Titan, right? Stuff like that. He makes some of the best use of some of the worst played cards, like some of the least played cards out there, like Camouflage Counter. He's doing really interesting stuff, but they already had to nerf him once. Ocean Buddies is coming in to give a very similar, if not better, level of access. Pre-nerf Devil Jin could do it defensively. Ocean Buddies can do it defensively. And the only thing really stopping Ocean Buddies is the fact that your rival could have those similar good card pool effects too. So I got these cards on my watch list because they're going to be really sick to brew around. But again, similar to the Massive Mutant Machine decks, once the brewing is complete and once the decks are refined, there's probably a small shelf life for them. And then the last one, probably the hottest take, is City Rampage. I think a lot of people are like split 50-50. Either you groan when you see this card or you love playing it. I don't think there's a lot of middle ground. I've been very lukewarm on it. When I played Godzilla, I put one in at the last minute because it just was like, whatever, But as it's gone on and on, 5 difficulty attacks keep coming out and they keep being so much higher quality in general than 4 difficulty attacks. It almost feels like 5 difficulty and 4 difficulty are their own archetype. It almost feels like you play a 4 difficulty deck or you play a 5 difficulty deck, Pretty much every deck is going to have some 5s or higher in it. This is, of course, completely separate from Titan decks that are playing like 4 check attacks and 7 diffs and 8 diffs, right? But yeah, I just see more and more so many decks that I want to play all 5 difficulties and all 6 difficulties, like Determined Advance, like Vast Hybrid Chimera Kraken, even decks like Earthbreaker, playing City Rampage on Earth with May and allies and Hunter's Ally and stuff like that. Like, there's just so many 5 diffs you want to include in decks right now that it feels like almost anything I can be. Even my meme decks, Suzuki Flurry with Deus Ex Machina, those are 2 5 diffs, and previously we were speculating on playing like Titan Cliff in it. So, like these mono high difficulty lineups are feeling better and better as more ways to pass these checks come out. City Rampage seems more ubiquitous across them. City Rampage keeps getting mentioned with Falling Titans as like a meme thing where, you play it with +2 to the check so you can't fail it, right? Like I think it's what Allura, you play the City Rampage, you play Falling Titans, you then remove the City Rampage. So like the worst you can check is a 5 and you've only got like 3 checks in the deck anyways, and you can fight over breakers. There's more check hacks happening, but this helps you fight over those and card pool clog. So I think City Rampage is definitely on the watch list, but it is a starter deck card. So, I think people have been asking for giant form on it for a long time. And we might see something like that in a while, but it's not dominating, and the decks did just get hit on their overall consistency. So we'll see where it goes. But I think a lot of times in the last month or so, someone has been talking about a deck. They have all these high difficulty cards. They have like one 4 diff. They have like one 4 diff attack in their deck that draws a card, and it's like, dude, just swap it out for any 5 diff and play City Rampage. So that's something I'm a little afraid of. But what do you guys think? Well, how did you think the ban list did? I know we were all talking about it's kind of old news at this point, but I wanted to talk about what the format looks like after a good ban list. And I liked the fact that, Hanji was still playable. I was on commentary. I was blown away that Hanji is still really good. I never thought that Hanji with, the was it large and medium or the small and medium Titans, those 4 difficulty backups was ever gonna be super playable, but Titan Pile sure did make it look that good. You know, there's enough Titan archetype synergy to make it look good. Deku doesn't need sweeping daggers. He never really did. He probably got hurt the least. But we're looking at Guilty Gear stuff to deal with him. And then Godzilla's were still floating around the top. You know, they were still performing pretty high. Overhaul with Massive Mutant Machine was still up there. Devil Jin was still in top cuts, right? So he lost teaming. He had to replace that card. Hate Fish came out of nowhere and was replacing teaming. So a lot of these decks survived, you know, and I think Porco and Pony can survive. They're in like that recovery phase where people kind of got to figure it out again. They got hurt, obviously, more than other decks, but that's where we're at. And I want to see more ban lists like this in the future. I want to see when the format gets stale and people are complaining, and months and months and months of people saying, okay, this time they hit teaming. Okay, this time they hit 9 Titans. Okay, this time for sure they hit something, you know? I think we can prevent that by looking at what this ban list did right and trying to emulate that in the future. So let me know down in the comments below, what did I miss? What's on your watch list? And what do you want to see for the next 11 days of Ace Miss?